Imagine it's January 1st, or perhaps it's your birthday, or even the first day of a new month. In other words, you've got a fresh beginning. You're filled with hope and excitement for a new chapter, ready to embrace a change or pursue a goal that's been quietly taking root in your mind for weeks and maybe even months. Maybe you've resolved to lose 20 pounds, or write that novel, or finally save enough for a vacation. You've written your goals in a brand new planner or an iPhone app. The planner's for us boomers who remember those days. And for the first week, man, you're on fire. You hit the gym, you write your word count, or you make a budget. But by mid-January, the wheels start to wobble. By February, they've fallen off entirely. Does this sound familiar? Welcome to my podcast on how not to retire. A psychological approach to retiring healthy and wealthy. Episode 35, Why New Year's Resolutions and Retirement Goals Fail. Greetings, I'm your host, Dr. Richard Himmer. So consider for a moment how many goals you've made in your lifetime. You are intimately familiar with setting goals if you've participated in athletics or music or scouting or church groups or perhaps your corporate brainwashing sessions. What you're probably not familiar with is hitting your goals. If so, you're not alone. Studies show that 91% of New Year's resolutions fail. Why? Why do so many of us set goals with the best intentions, only to find ourselves back where we started, or worse, and then feeling like failures? The answer lies in something James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, clearly explains. Goals alone do not change your life. Your underlying system of habits does. But this isn't about January resolutions. It's also about retirement goals. Retirement for many is the next chapter, or as I've often referred to it as a bonus chapter. It's a time when people imagine themselves traveling the world, spending more time with loved ones, or finally taking up that long-desired hobby. Yet, just like New Year's resolutions, retirement plans often fall short because they focus too much on the grand outcomes and not enough on the daily habits that make those outcomes possible. In today's episode, we'll explore why goal setting without habit building is a recipe for frustration, the psychological traps that keep us stuck in this cycle, and, most importantly, how to break free. Along the way, we'll follow the story of Echo and Oren. I hope you recognize where those names came from. A retired couple who learned that habits, not just lofty goals, transformed their post-work lives, also known as retirement. So what's the problem with goals? Why are goals inherently bad? Well, when setting goals, too often we focus on outcomes. When hitting goals, we should focus on the process and let the process lead to the goals. James Clear makes a compelling argument in his book Atomic Habits. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. When we set New Year's resolutions or retirement goals, we're often hyper-focused on the outcome. Lose 20 pounds, save $10,000, travel to Europe. But these outcomes don't address how we'll get there. The problem? Goals are temporary. They're an endpoint, not a roadmap. You might achieve your goal, but you'll likely slide back into old patterns if you don't have the habits to sustain them. For example, Echo and Oren had big dreams for their retirement. Echo wanted to get in shape and spend more time outdoors, while Oren envisioned writing a book and traveling. But without daily habits to support these ambitions, their plans fizzled out. Echo joined a gym, but stopped going after a month. And Oren bought a fancy notebook that sat unopened on his desk. Their goals remained just that, goals, because they lacked the systems to bring those dreams to life. Another issue with goals is that they create a finish line mentality. Once you achieve the goal, assuming you hit the goal, you often lose motivation. So James Clear writes, "The purpose of setting goals is to win the game. The purpose of building systems is to continue playing the game." This same principle applies to retirement. Retirement is not, underline, not the end goal. It's a new starting position, using established second half of life skills to enjoy a quality of life. And as I've said so many times, financial planning is overly focused on the quantity of your bank account. I mentioned this in my first podcast, and it's worthy of saying it again. Without a quality of life, an extended quantity of life is akin to bondage. For Echo and Oren, retirement initially felt like a finish line. After decades of hard work, they thought achieving their financial goals and stepping away from their careers would automatically lead to fulfillment. But they quickly realized that retirement with a large bank account balance without meaningful daily routines felt aimless. Their days blurred together, and their big dreams, they remained out of reach. The lesson? Success in retirement or any phase of life is not about reaching a milestone. It's about building a system that supports continuous growth and purpose. One of the most transformative concepts in the book Atomic Habits is identity-based habits. Now, I have talked about identity and purpose continuously for the past 34 podcasts. Much of what I learned, or part of what I learned is better said, comes from James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. Echo's goal was to get in shape. But what if she had focused instead on becoming a healthy, active person? Do you see the identity there? When you shift your identity, your habits naturally align with your values. A healthy, active person makes choices that prioritize well-being, not just for a few months, but indefinitely. Okay, so similarly, Oren's goal was to write a book. But what if he had instead identified as a writer? Writers don't wait for inspiration to strike. They write consistently. This identity shift would have helped Oren focus less on the daunting idea of completing a book and a lot more on the daily habit of writing, even if it was just a few paragraphs or even a sentence a day. Clear summarizes this really nicely. He says, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. In other words, everything you do, every behavior you have is a vote for who you are and what you're becoming. Too many of us, we find this in a collusionary state. We're getting exactly the opposite of what we want. So if Echo cast votes for being an active person by walking each morning, or if Oren cast votes for being a writer by jotting down ideas daily, they'll achieve their goals and sustain them. This is called the power of tiny habits, another key principle that we find in the book Atomic Habits. And this is the power of small, incremental changes. Clear calls this the 1% rule. If you get just 1% better every day, the cumulative impact over time is extraordinary. The 1% rule simply means making tiny improvements each day, so small they might initially seem insignificant. Let me give you an example for those engineers out there who don't know how to measure 1% improvement per day. I say that because I've had that said back to me so many times. So let me see if this helps you a little bit to understand. Instead of overhauling your entire diet, you might start by swapping one unhealthy snack for one healthy one. Or if you want to start walking more, you could begin with just 5 minutes a day. Now, is that exactly 1%? Probably not, and we don't care. The 1% rule is a metaphor for something called tiny, which you don't really have an exact measurement for. These small, consistent actions may not feel like much at the moment, but over time, they add up. Think of it like compound interest. Just as small investments grow into significant riches, tiny daily improvements lead to big results in the long run. The key here is consistency, not perfection. When Echo and Oren embraced this concept, their lives changed. Everything changed. Instead of trying to overhaul their retirement routines overnight, they started small. Echo began by walking 10 minutes a day. Oren committed to writing 100 words every morning. These tiny changes felt manageable, and over time they compounded into lasting habits. Clear in his book breaks down habits into a simple framework. Four things. Cue, craving, response, and reward. To build good habits or to break habits, all these things apply. For Echo, setting her sneakers by the door before bed, that was her cue to start walking. She craved the sense of accomplishment she felt after moving her body. And if you've done running or any kind of athletics, you know that the afterglow is just so rewarding. So you use the cue to get to the craving. And her reward was the boost in energy she felt afterwards. For Oren, his cue was placing his notebook and pen on the kitchen table before breakfast. He craved the satisfaction of seeing his thoughts take shape on the page. His response was writing for 15 minutes, and his reward was a growing sense of progress toward his book. So the question looms always, why do goals fail so often in retirement? And here, I'm going to address with you what's called the myth of motivation. One common reason New Year's resolutions and retirement goals fail is that we rely too heavily on willpower and motivation. Clear argues that motivation is fleeting. Instead of relying on it, we need to design our environment to make good habits easy and bad habits hard. For Echo, this meant keeping her workout clothes in plain sight and planning her walks for the same time each day. For Oren, this meant setting up a dedicated writing space where distractions were minimal. By designing their environments, they didn't have to rely so much on motivation. This is true for studying, for taking tests, for writing papers in my dissertation. I wrote at the same time every day at the same place every day. My body and my mind became conditioned into that, and that's the key. I tried the best I could to follow this advice and create an environment that allowed me to be successful instead of using my willpower to fight it. If you've not heard this before, this is a really cool quote. Willpower is not on will call. Willpower is not on will call. You simply can't call up more willpower when your habits, or better said, neural pathways, say otherwise. You will never win the battle of willpower over existing habits. This is the all or nothing thinking. This is a trap. It's a mentality trap. Many resolutions fail because we expect no mistakes. We expect perfection. If we miss one workout, skip a day of writing, or break a streak, we feel like we failed, and then we give up entirely. We throw the baby out with the bathwater. Clear emphasizes the importance of bouncing back quickly. The key to success is not never falling off track, but getting back on track as quickly as possible. In other words, when you fall off the horse, get back on the horse. Echo and Oren embrace this mindset. If Echo missed a walk, she didn't beat herself up. She went on the next day. If Oren skipped a morning writing session, he made up for it in the afternoon. This all starts with identity, building habits for a fulfilling retirement. Instead of setting a goal, ask yourself, who do I want to become in retirement? For Echo, the answer wasn't just someone who exercises. It was a healthy, active retiree who enjoys the outdoors. For Oren, it wasn't just someone who writes a book, but a creative, lifelong learner who expresses himself through writing. Doesn't that sound cool? Doesn't that a much more healthy, uplifting type of a mindset? Putting your living style along with your identity. Every habit they built stemmed from their identity. The key here is to focus on systems, not outcomes. Goals give you direction, but systems create progress. Echo didn't just focus on losing weight. She built a system supporting her active lifestyle. She scheduled daily walks, joined a hiking group. See how the environment now is supporting what she wants to become, and the environment becomes a motivating factor. This is where the dopamine release hits. It's an anticipatory drug. You get excited because you're going to do something that you want to do that gets you to where you want to be. And then she experimented with different healthy recipes for her diet. Oren didn't just focus on finishing his book. He committed to writing for 15 minutes every morning, no matter what. Clear outlines 4 laws for building good habits. And laws in this sense is like a principle. It works every time it's practiced. Number 1, make it obvious. Place clues for good habits in your environment. For Echo, it meant leaving her sneakers by the door. For Oren, it means he's put his notebook out in a distraction-free place, but that he saw. Number 2, make it attractive. So number 1, make it obvious. Number 2, make it attractive. Pair habits with something you enjoy. That's called habit stacking. We'll get to that in just a second. Echo listened to her favorite podcast while walking. Oren rewarded himself with tea after each writing session. Now, anything along that line is going to work. This is just an example that they used. Number 3, make it easy. So make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy. Start small. Echo began with a 10-minute walk. Oren started with 100 words a day. 4, make it satisfying. So 1, obvious. 2, attractive. 3, easy. 4, satisfying. Celebrate small wins. Echo tracked her walks on a calendar, and Oren enjoyed watching his word count grow. Now we're going to get into habit stacking. Habit stacking is a simple way to build new habits by attaching them to a benign or existing one. So Clear writes, after this habit, I will that habit. For example, for Echo, after breakfast, I will go for a walk. After brushing my teeth, I will do 10 minutes of stretching. So the benign habit is the breakfast, is the brushing the teeth. The new habit is the walk or 10 minutes of stretching. Okay, so for Oren, after pouring my morning coffee, benign existing habit, I'm going to write for 15 minutes. After finishing eating lunch, benign, I will spend 20 minutes reading. Okay, that's the new habit. By tying their new habits to routines they already had, they made them automatic. And then they grew their habits, and there's your 1%. So habit stacking leads to the 1%. Setting a goal based on identity leads to the habits, and habit stacking entrenches those habits. When Echo and Oren shifted their focus from goals to habits, their retirement and their lifestyle transformed. Echo didn't just lose weight. She prioritized her health every day. She became healthy. Oren didn't just write a book. He enjoyed the creative writing process. He became a writer. Their days felt meaningful, their routines aligned with their values, and their big dreams slowly but surely became a reality. So a final thought here. The thought is about how habits create a purposeful retirement. Retirement is often seen as a time to relax. And I just don't like that idea. Relaxing means you get a rest from work. But it's not a time to do nothing. The body, the mind is not designed to be passive. This is an opportunity to grow, to explore, and to redefine yourself. And for most folks that I've talked to, it's really to find themselves. Too many people's identity is caught up with their career. They don't really have an individual or personal identity. The key is to focus less on grand goals and more on the small, consistent habits that shape who you are or who you want to be. So instead of asking, what do I want to achieve in retirement? Ask yourself, who do I want to become in this bonus chapter of my life? And then start casting small votes for that person every day. As Claire reminds us, habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. Whether January 1st or any day of the year. It's never too late to build lasting habits and create a truly fulfilling retirement. Thanks a lot for joining me, Dr. Richard Himmer, on this episode of How Not to Retire, a psychological approach to retiring healthy and wealthy. Remember, true abundance in your retirement years comes not just from what's in your bank account, but from the riches of your experiences, relationships, and the wisdom you've gathered over a lifetime. Until next time, remember, don't try harder, try different.